Hello. Thank you once again for joining. Wow, 6 people have already liked this before I've even started, so that makes me feel very special. Thank you so much. It's great to be back and to talk to you again about our favorite topic of languages. And it's always a pleasure, and I hope that you like, or at least are intrigued by, the topic this week. It's a topic that throughout my language learning journey has come up again and again and again and again. Strangely, there are a few stories I want to tell you today about this topic. So the first one is that, as a general rule, I've very often come across people who, without knowing any of the language, the first thing they will ask is, how do you say X word? And it'll be a swear word, a bad word, a curse word, whatever you want to use for that terminology, but a word that's in polite conversation, not something you would expect to say. So I always found it a bit weird that people would want to learn those first. Like, are you going to go and just use those with people where they actually mean something to the person, instead of like, hello, how are you, please, thank you, talking about yourself a little bit or something? It always felt a little bit weird. On the other side of the coin, I've also met people who, when somebody from another country goes to their country and they don't speak the language, they try and get them to say these rude words. Or rude for many people, sometimes in some circles they may not be so rude, but generally speaking, they're considered rude words. And they find it hilarious and they laugh and they joke about it. And I think if no one's hurt, it's sort of no harm, no foul. But at the same time, it always intrigues me what the motivation is to teach people that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where I want to go into my story with swear words in languages. So my personal story on this, I guess really with English and French, I kind of learned them, but I knew that they were bad words. I had reactions from teachers, and I had reactions from parents, and I had reactions from people around me, like society. And really, swear words are exactly that. They are things that people react to in society and agree upon as words that you use or don't use in certain situations. And as you grow up speaking the language, whether you speak it at home or whether you speak it at school or wherever you use it, and you grow up speaking it in a community, you get to see the different reactions from different sections of society to these words, right? So that's how you learn that these words are good or bad. And when I was doing it with English and even with French to a very high degree, I really picked up on what sounded really bad and what was really not acceptable, and the ones that were sort of on the boundary and were okay. And so I really had a bit more of a feeling for those languages. When it got to Spanish, I would say that, we didn't learn these kinds of words at school, and I got to a point where I was, pretty good at Spanish. I got to university and I was writing essays in Spanish, but I didn't really use any swear words. There weren't really things that I came across so much, because obviously I was having lessons with teachers and teachers didn't really use them. And then at university, I started meeting a few Spanish speakers from different parts of the Spanish-speaking world. And they did teach me a couple of them, but I didn't really use them because I didn't know how to or why I would use them. But then when I went on my year abroad, I actually lived with a group of Spaniards. And when I lived with them, I got used to the way they spoke. And they used a lot of swear words that I didn't realize how bad they were, because we were in a very contained group of sort of, very early 20-year-olds. So the kind of language you use in that kind of context is quite different to what you would use maybe outside. And so my Spanish during that time, living with them and speaking only Spanish pretty much all the time, meant that my Spanish fluency went really rose. I mean, I got pretty good at Spanish, but what I didn't notice is the type of Spanish I was using, and the Spanish I was using contained a lot of these what would be seen as unacceptable words for a number of people in Spanish-speaking society. And I didn't know this or notice this because no one reacted to me speaking this way within the context of our friend group. It was just the way they spoke, and I was imitating the way they spoke, and that was kind of it, really. It wasn't until I went to Italy to study at university in Verona, and there were some Spanish-speaking students on my course, and of course, outside of the class, they were all speaking Spanish, and I would join in with the Spanish conversation. And one of them actually turned around to me and said, "Your Spanish is really, really good, but why do you swear so much?" And it was at that point that it made me sort of sit back and evaluate what I was saying and why I was saying it. And I had to sort of dive into my sort of the inner recesses of my own sort of consciousness and think, okay, this person's reacted to this, and they did it in a very nice and polite way, but clearly they were shocked. And what I don't like to do is to sort of deliberately offend people, whether that's on purpose or whether it's sort of accidentally. It's not kind of in my nature to be that person. I'm not that person. I'm much more of a kind of a diplomatic style person, in sort of the way I act. I mean, I'll stand my ground, of course, in sort of situations where that's required, but at the same time, I don't want to be openly and blatantly offensive to people. It's not. I don't find that particularly useful as a way of communicating. So anyway, I went away and I analysed all of this and thought about my Spanish and how I was using it. And slowly but surely, over the time I was in Italy, I stopped using certain turns of phrase and words in my Spanish and kind of filtered it to bring it to a sort of just a regular Spanish. I mean, I kept my fluency, I kept my ability to understand everything, and I retained, you know, sort of the sort of pronunciation lilt that I'd learned from the south of Spain, from that contact, and all of that was retained. So when I went back to university in the UK again, my Spanish was actually, you know, pretty good through having gone through that year and then gone through that sort of purification process, so to speak. And I now don't tend to use that kind of language in Spanish. And I mean, I'm not that I'm a prude or that I am shy of such language, and I definitely don't judge people who choose to express themselves using certain words. That's not my game either. I have no dog in the race in terms of you can express yourself as you want to express yourself, and it's not for me to judge, really. Um, at the same time, I did recognize that using that vocabulary in Spanish, even though I spoke it very well, I didn't have that history with the language in the same way as somebody from a Spanish-speaking country or who'd grown up in a Spanish-speaking country had. And so I recognized that actually it wasn't really, for me, it wasn't appropriate to use those things because some of that language can really pull on the emotions, I think, of people who use use language. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of things, there are definitely in sort of in Spanish, people will often say, certain words would be used more often than they are in English or in other languages, and that definitely there are definitely differences in those, and I agree that there are differences. But I think as somebody who came at Spanish later in life, I mean, I was 16 when I started learning Spanish. Um, I didn't think that it was any longer appropriate for me to speak using that type of vocabulary. So I stopped. I won't say it was particularly easy. It took me a month to kind of filter the language and get it back to where was it kind of acceptable and no longer offensive to people who just listen to me. Um, the other stories that I want to sort of tell you about are connected to my own feeling from English. So people who I've met who have spoken English very, very well. And it kind of cemented my feelings and thoughts on this. Um, I mean, a number of you wrote to me and said, you think it's good to learn this type of vocabulary because it's good to understand what's being said to you. And I totally agree. I think that knowing this vocabulary is absolutely part of the language. And I think that it is something that we should learn and we should study and we should try to understand as best we can. Because if you understand swear words and you understand words that could cause offense, then you're better placed to really fit into the culture, into the society, and you can operate way more easily if you know all this kind of stuff. So absolutely learn it. Not particularly for use maybe, but just to know it. The the thing that happened to me was that when I was working in the Netherlands, many years later, I lived in the Netherlands for 2 years, and there was a, a lady I worked with, and she never spoke to me in English ever. She never, and she still to this day, if I ever write her a message, she still never writes to me in English. She always writes to me in Dutch, and her English is absolutely amazing. It's probably one of the best English levels that I've ever heard from a non sort of somebody who's not grown up in that context of an English speaking country. And her accent is actually one of the closest I've ever heard as well to somebody who would have been born and raised in the UK. I rarely heard many people speak English in that way. But she always, for some reason, felt conscious speaking English to me and never did. And she only ever spoke to me in Dutch. Now, one thing that she shared with me was a conversation about when she had lived in the UK, she was learning the swear words. And if you don't know, English swear words are used in Dutch a lot. And they're also used to quite a degree as well in German, but also in other languages. Now, when they're used in the English swear words in those languages, they don't have the same for the people of those countries, for Germans and for Dutch speakers, they do not have the same level of severity as the natural words of the languages. So they sound milder for some reason. And to our ears still as English speakers, they still sound very strong. And many people who watch English, particularly American English TV and films, they will hear a lot of words that are used, and they seem to be used a lot, right? And are quite common. And that's kind of a really weird context, a bit like me in my Spanish bubble. It wasn't representative of how people actually use the language with all stratas of society and all sections of society represented. And what happened to my friend in the Netherlands is she was living in the UK and she used what is in English the strongest word, which is the C word. We call it the C word. I'm not going to use the word on a live broadcast just because it is particularly offensive for a lot of people. And my channel's not about this, it's about describing language. But if you don't know the C word, you can always Google what is the C word and you can find out. But I'm not going to do that because I know a number of you wrote to me and you said you found the topic and also these kinds of words very offensive. So I'm talking around this, and I'm doing so very deliberately. But she used this word with somebody and called it to them directly, thinking it would be a funny thing to do. And the person who heard the word, it was directed at, actually slapped her in the face. And she was really shocked because she didn't mean it in any particular way. But what she said to me was she never used the word again in English. And she said she didn't know if it was the tone she got wrong or the context she misjudged. And this is one of the reasons why I always say learning this kind of vocabulary is, yes, useful to understand more of the society and societal norms and people and how they use language, and to understand what's being said to you as well, and if it's bad, and to get an idea generally of how bad these words are. But using them, and many people will say this to you, oh, we use this word, but we use it with our friends as a joke when we're particularly close. Well, yes, you may do, but as somebody who grew up in a society and a culture, you will know when that happens. If you arrive into that culture and you didn't go through a school system and you don't have a circle of friends from your childhood and you don't have that kind of situation, you're unlikely to be able to judge that with 100% accuracy, and you will potentially get it wrong, and you will potentially cause offense, and it will potentially cause offense to the point that someone will have an actual physical reaction to it, like what happened to my friend. Now, I found that a really interesting conversation, and I thought that she was extremely mature in sort of sharing it with me and telling me what happened, and I thought that was actually had a lot of respect for her for giving me that insight. And it cemented kind of my experience from university with Spanish. And the other thing that happened whilst I was living in the Netherlands was I got into a conversation with another Dutch speaker who, again, never spoke to me in English, but we were talking about swear words, and and this person said to me, "We have these really bad words in Dutch, but you don't have them in English." I said, "What do you mean we don't have them in English?" And so, well, we use your words and they don't really mean very much to us. So they don't really have the same effect as Dutch. So you don't have those kinds of swear words in English. And it took me an entire conversation to try and explain that the English words that we used in Dutch, yes, in for Dutch ears, they didn't mean very much. But for me and for other people from the United Kingdom, from the United States, from Canada, from Australia, from New Zealand, from South Africa, from India, from different parts of the English-speaking world, where people do speak English as their first language or main language or one of their first languages, it it does carry more weight than it does in Dutch. And honestly, I'm not convinced that even at the end of the conversation, she fully accepted what I was saying. And that to me showed that even with somebody spelling out just when and how strong things can be, actually, as somebody who even speaks the language, it can be extremely difficult to really get what that's about. And possibly these are the kinds of things that are best avoided. And maybe talk about them with people you can trust, talk about them with friends, talk about some teachers even are open to discuss these kinds of things, just so that you can fully understand them. Now, there are a number of languages where swear words are used very, very often. And some words that when you translate them sound worse in your own language than they do in the language that you're studying, or in another culture or context. So there will be words that you can use potentially, but it's really a process of elimination to find out what those words are, if you want to use them, and conversations and sensitivity into, okay, what do these mean and when do I use them? And the when do I use them is also very important. Now, another situation I was in was I was walking around a town in the UK with a friend of mine who will remain nameless, and this friend of mine was speaking in English and speaks English very, very well, very, very well indeed. Um, However, is not from an English-speaking country and did not grow up speaking English, but speaks it not nevertheless very, very well. Again, one of the better speakers of English I've heard. Um, but what was really weird is for me as an English speaker, um, and I guess also sensitive to what I say around different people. Um, we were walking around town, and This person was using language that was kind of, yeah, sort of the F word and different things, which, I mean, as I say, I'm not a prude, so I mean, I'm a big boy. I'm not offended by somebody using this language, particularly, if that's how they want to express themselves. What I found really interesting was that the language didn't change when we entered a shop or somewhere else where there were children around. And where I'm from, you would many people, I mean, I'm not going to say everyone, but many people would automatically change their language to fit the context of, say, around children, around families, that kind of thing. And I had to actually say, look, we don't speak that way in front of particularly young children, because you get very strange looks. People might say something, but they would generally just judge you and look at you and feel a bit, I want to get my kid away from you. And I had to point that out as okay, it's fine from my point of view if you want to use these words in English, but just so you know that they do carry a lot of meaning and a lot of weight for the people who only speak English or speak English as a main language and have it in school and everything else. Because if the children hear that and they hear it normalized, they'll go to school, they may use it and they may get in trouble, because you'd get in trouble with the teacher for using this kind of language. So when it comes to learning a new language, I think it's often safest to avoid using these words uh, until you've got to a point where you've had enough experience with situations to know certain words are kind of these not quite swear words, but or boundary words that don't carry the same weight and are safer. And I think following by example is probably a good idea. Not to the point where I was in my small group of Spanish speakers and just sort of following 20-something-year-olds' way of speaking Spanish, because that's not representative of society as a whole. And yeah, I mean, I hope that sort of discussing this helped to sort of raise awareness for this. Okay. And now I'm going to come to some questions, if you have any questions for me. I'm not seeing anything on YouTube. I have a funny feeling that the YouTube chat may not be working, or may at least not be visible for me for some reason. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Now it's arrived. I just clicked on something and it came up. So great. None of the YouTube questions were coming up at all. Hello to everyone who joined, and thank you. I wasn't ignoring you all. I always do this sort of talk in the beginning, and then we get to questions afterwards if you're not used to this format. So, so I got a question. I saw one flash up actually. Können Sie Deutsch sprechen? Ja, das kann ich. Aber ich spreche eigentlich kein Deutsch jetzt. Also für die Fragen zum Beispiel ist es ja überhaupt kein Problem. Es ist nur, wenn ich über was besonders sprechen will, zum Beispiel, ja, das, was ich jetzt gerade besprochen habe, dann spreche ich dann lieber auf Englisch, damit jeder mich verstehen kann, ne? Okay. Let me see if I can answer some more questions. So I do tend to do these in English for simple reason that English tends to be the language that most of you all know. And for me, it's a language that obviously I know pretty well as my own language. But yeah, I tend to do it that way. Habla español, por favor. Es que suelo hablar inglés en estos live porque casi todo el mundo habla inglés, y lo que pasa es que si hablo español o hablo alemán o hablo otro idioma, es que no, es que es un poco difícil. Puedo responder preguntas así en varios idiomas, no pasa nada, pero suelo hacer todo eso en inglés. So let me see. I see that question twice. So yeah, I normally do these in English because of that, and also yeah, I mean, well, it's my language, so it makes sense for me as well. It's a language that I don't really use that much spoken outside except for outside of kind of the internet, because at home I don't use English particularly very much. I use it with my daughter, alongside other languages, but I don't speak English with my wife, and I don't use English outside the house usually either. So I don't really mind speaking English, and in fact, I find it quite useful to use it and to talk about different topics in English. So there we go. But yeah, I do tend to answer questions in other languages, which I'm happy to do, and then I go back to English again. Thank you so much for all of your kind words. Okay. Brazilian Portuguese. Wow, you're going to learn Brazilian Portuguese. Fantastic. Michael, enjoy. I hope it goes well. Okay. Was it difficult for you to process um, the filtering? Oh, the filtering of the language. So the process of actually filtering your language to get rid of the swear words out of your language. It took me a month to do it properly because I got into a habit. I mean, bear in mind that I've been speaking Spanish as my main home language for a year, and it's a long time to speak a language every day. And this is before the internet and before cheap phone calls. So phone calls to the UK from where I was living were like €5, and I could really only call my family maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, something like that. So I didn't speak English for that whole year, pretty much. I was at university studying languages as well, so I was taking classes in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Italian, and I didn't really speak much English. And then at home, I lived with these Spanish people and some French people, and I didn't really speak, but mainly Spanish I lived with most of the time. And so I didn't speak anything else. So for a year, I got very used to using this kind of language and speaking as they did. So it was absolutely a process of unlearning to get back to, okay, let's sort of filter my language and make sure that I'm using appropriate language when I go back to university, and also for when I'm writing things and speaking in more formal context. Because language learning is also about learning different genres and different, when you use certain words and certain expressions in certain situations. And so that was definitely part of that learning for me. And it took the full month, I would say. I was stopped using certain words very quickly, but then there were other words that I didn't realize how strong they were for other speakers. Unfortunately, the Spanish people that I knew at the university in Italy were very good and very understanding. And I said, "Look, I'm very sorry. I don't want to offend you. Um, I'll stop using them, but please do let me know when a word I use is offensive or isn't maybe something you'd expect to hear in a social situation." And they did that. They gave me the feedback, and I was able to work on it over the month, which I was very pleased with. I'm very happy that they did that. So now I'm kind of left with the understanding and the knowledge of that vocabulary, but I don't use it. I hear it a lot on TV and things and in songs, but I don't use it. Um, what's my mother tongue? English is my first language. Um, okay. Mm. See, are there any more questions here on Instagram? I can't see. Bad language is very common in Ireland. Yeah, it's very common in many countries, and I don't know if I look. I mean, this is why I say I'm not a prude. I don't. Some of you wrote to me and said that you found it quite offensive, and no one should use it. And it was some of you even wrote and said that you thought it was to the point of it sounded like uncultured or you weren't brought up properly. I don't know if I go that far myself. I see sometimes swearing is used as an intensifier with emotion to really inject someone's full force of emotion uh, into an utterance, into an idea, into a reaction, without shouting or without without acting aggressively, it would be used in that kind of way. And that's what it does, right? Swearing does that because it sort of it makes you jump up and get sort of, you hear it when people swear. So I think from that point of view, I get it. I get the use of it, and I don't personally have a huge problem with it. Um, and so, yeah, um, but you see it everywhere. But it's knowing the context, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's knowing when it's appropriate, and that as a learner of a language is super, super tricky to get 100% right. And as I say, even people I know who have spoken sort of the best English I've ever heard from somebody who's not from an English-speaking country or not lived or grown up in an English-speaking country, even those people still have sort of errors in judgment in as to what's appropriate and when. So the thing is that it could be something that happens. For example, there could be social groups where swearing is totally normal and they don't change the language for anyone, and that happens too, right? But the thing is that what you have to do is see who you are in your own language, and are you representing yourself by the same standards you have in your own language as you are in the new language. So it could be that, this social group here uses swear words in your language. You don't. You say, I don't use these words in my own language. But then you learn English or another language, and the same type of social group might use those swear words in that in English or the other target language that you have. But you don't use them in your own language, and then you start using them in English. So there's a mismatch of who you are and how you're then perceived through that new language and through that new culture. And that's where I would say, if that is you, maybe it might fit. You might make friends who are in exactly the same type of social dynamics and norms that from where you're from. And I mean, knock yourself out, go for it. I mean, that's all I can say. But it's being aware of who you're talking to, what the situations are, is quite important, I think. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Let me see. ¿Qué hacen del sur? Gracias. Vaya. Why do you love languages? What is your reason to learn the languages? Okay. And what's in among, okay, with other polyglots. So simple for me, really. I just really enjoy learning languages because I like to express myself in as many ways as possible. I like to meet as many people as possible and understand them and where they're from and their culture and their heritage. And learning languages helps me to do that, helps me to see different points of view, helps me to understand history from a different angle. And generally, I tend to choose languages based on sort of opportunities to learn a language, availability of language, whether I'm using it for work or where I live. So there are many reasons why I'll choose certain languages. And then, yeah, I do lots of them because, yeah, I like to explore as many as possible, and I like to then see the relationships between different languages and how they meet and how they merge and how they how learning one language will help to enhance the knowledge of a second or third or fourth language. So I quite like that as well. I think that's pretty interesting. So that's why I keep learning more, and I just enjoy doing it. What part of the UK are you from? So I'm originally I grew up around Chester, and I'm actually my heritage is Welsh and Scouse, pretty much. Yeah. So the Northwest. We call it the Northwest, but if you look on a map of Great Britain, it's kind of in the middle, right? We don't call it the Midlands. We call so North Wales, and my family's from North Wales, and as we call Northwest England. So that's where all my family's from. Okay. Let me see if there are any more things. Some things are doing okay. Okay. How's your Welsh? My Welsh is okay. I mean, I learned it. So I had Welsh words in my English growing up. So we always knew certain expressions and numbers and things in Welsh. Just because actually my grandmother's parents spoke English as a second language. They were first language Welsh speakers, and it was at a time where I mean, it wasn't encouraged to teach your children Welsh, and unfortunately, they only retained certain words with their children, and that's kind of what happened with me. I just picked up the words that were spoken in the house, and that was kind of it. But yeah, I mean, I went back and I did learn to speak and to communicate in Welsh, and in fact, I did some interviews on Welsh TV and Welsh radio later, so that and for me, it felt quite cathartic to do that. I think when you know you've lost a language in your family, particularly what would have been my mother tongue, it does feel it's quite cathartic to sort of get that back to a level, obviously. I didn't grow up speaking Welsh, but at the same time, it's always been sort of there in my life. So yeah. What was my experience with Speakly? It was very positive, and I'm still using it. Actually, I need to post my final blog post about my overall experience. But yeah, it's been very busy. I've been organizing things for the Polyglot conference, so it's been a bit busy. But yeah, it's been good. Okay, I'm just going to have a look at the questions here on YouTube and see if I can answer some of these. Hey Olga, nice to see you back from your holiday. Hope you had a nice time in Greece. Swearing in English also changes on depends on the country. For example, what's acceptable in some conversations in Australia is not. Okay, yeah, exactly, absolutely. It's not okay in Texas. Trust me, I love it. So you've had direct experience with that, Laurie. I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. What's acceptable in one place is not acceptable in another. It's quite interesting. American English and British English, we have words that mean very different things, and some of them are quite rude in English that are used in the US, and in the UK they're quite rude, and vice versa. Sometimes they're not even swear words and they're rude or offensive. Oh, you don't swear, you only use so instead of swear words. Okay, good stuff. Okay, konnichiwa. It's the car. Okay, what's this one? Okay. Mama. Am I well? I think it says. Yeah. Genki desu ka? Genki desu. Sumimasen. Okay, Tiffany, I agree. Knowing vocabulary is good. It doesn't mean you have to use it exactly. J'ai seulement appris les insultes en japonais. Oh, en japonais. Enfin, en japonais, c'est un peu. Oui, c'est un peu difficile, hein, si on dit que ça, quoi. Madonna. Madonna is okay, I think, isn't it? I mean, it's not too bad. The C word is any word that mum said I must never use when I was younger. Jason, good mum there, telling you the right way. Yeah, the C word's pretty strong in English. It's pretty strong. I find the problem is not with talking about things in order to offend people, is that as soon as you can't talk about anything. Yeah, Robert, I think this is why. I mean, I don't have a problem talking around these subjects. I think that this is the thing is you've got this, freedom of conversation, and you can talk around the subject quite happily without causing offense. And I think that for me is kind of the key, right? It's if I don't need to cause offense, I'm not going to. I mean, if there's a certain word that I can't talk around. I have to just use or give an example of something. Then I can frame that, I think, in a fairly neutral way. So yeah, I don't really feel. I don't really feel that it's too much tiptoeing around it. I think it's yeah. I don't worry to that extent, I guess. Yeah, poor woman with there, exactly. I agree with you. It's also being good to learn vocabulary. Yeah, exactly. It's true, swear words in other languages will never be seen as meaningful unless you have a lot of experience with people using them. Hurtfully in real life, absolutely, Lincoln. This is a thing that I've noticed very often, that until you've heard words, and also some words that you can use as offensive words and may not even be swear words, just words to insult someone. They can have different meanings for different people. It's quite interesting to see how idiolect plays a part in these situations. So even someone's own specific idiolect or a group acceptance or use of a word can also put a color on a word as well. It's quite interesting. The best sounding yeah, Greek word. Yeah, malaka is used in Greek a lot. So like, for example, it's Greek people are sometimes surprised when I know that word in Greek. It's funny because I had a friend who was born in Malacca, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and so when I told my Greek friends that I had a friend who was born in Malacca, they thought it was hilarious. But they use it a lot, and they tend to use it um, in a very playful way as well. Um, but again, it's not a word I would use in most situations. I really wouldn't. I tend not to, even a word like that in Greek that is very commonly used. I still don't use it in my normal conversations. Use mild swear words, native English. Okay, like fiddlesticks. Okay, what on earth's that? Fudgesicles. I've never heard that. Biscuits. I've never heard anybody use those. The last two. That's hilarious. Fiddlesticks, obviously, I know. Um, yeah, sometimes we use things like that, right? So, in Spanish, they typically, instead of using the word for God, they will use the word diez in place of it, 10, because it sounds the same, and that's kind of what they tend to do in Spanish. I tend even not to do that very often. The one that I have retained in Spanish is jolín, which sounds a little weird sometimes to Spanish speakers. And again, it is a little bit of instead of saying the other word, you're sort of jolines. It's a very mild sort of exclamation in Spanish. But I don't use that much. Sometimes I might use it, but that still comes out every now and again without thinking, because I think it's kind of a cute way of saying it. And it's the thing that one of my friends' mums used to use all the time, and she was very proper. So I feel fairly safe in using that expression, and it gets funny reactions in Mexico. Actually, people thought it was hilarious that I would use that word, and it kind of encouraged me to use it more, because I got this funny reaction, and it's quite nice when you get that kind of reaction where people are like laughing at you with you, and it was kind of a talking point about the different types of Spanish. So yeah, sometimes I would. I did change some words actually, even like so so my Spanish word for a straw was pajita. That's my normal Spanish word for a straw. But in Mexico they don't use it. They use popote. And popote is because pajita, even in Spain, right, it's got other connotations. I mean, you don't use pajita without thinking of another word in Spanish. And in Mexico and other Latin American speaking countries, the Latin American countries, sorry, in Spanish speaking countries, you'll use that word pajita, and it only sounds rude. So when I went to Mexico, I definitely switched straight to popote as soon as possible. I used the word because I didn't know the word at first, and then I used it because I was in a coffee a coffee chain wanted to buy a coffee, and I wanted a straw, so I asked for one, and they went, "You want a what?" And I said, "Oh, what do you call that?" because I could see the reaction straight away, like of this. Oh my word, what on earth are you saying? And she went, oh, popote. And I was like, yeah, popote, popote. So that's, I sort of grabbed onto that word as soon as I could and didn't let it go the whole time I was in Mexico. Scandinavian literature, etc. Crime fiction, but only many swear words are used. Yeah, for them from that. Olga, yeah, do you know one of the thing with Scandinavian languages particularly is like obviously the bad words are so different to the words that you use in other languages because the worst ones are to do with the devil, right? And hell, and of course they're not. They actually do have a normal meaning too, whereas the English speaking swear words that we use, except for the word bastard, which actually has a proper meaning, okay, that is a valid meaning to use. I can't think of the other words as having another polite, well, not polite, but a meaning that you could use in polite conversation. For example, describing uh, someone in literature or in historically as being a bastard was a word that described someone being born out of wedlock, and so there is still that connection to it, right? You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater with some of these words, and the same word for helvete or fan in Scandinavian languages. With if you're not saying them to offend somebody, but you're using them to talk about that context. Same in Quebec French. Tabernacle is a bad word, right? But it is also a tabernacle. It actually does mean something else. So, and in Spanish, you have words that are used again, particularly from religious contexts, that have their own original meaning still. Hostia in Spanish is a bad word, but it is also the communion bread. And so you can still use the word hostia without being rude. It's all to do with context. This is why I say context is king, right? You don't know who you're talking to each time. Il faut regarder South Park pour comprendre comment les enfants américains parlent. À mon avis, c'est pas vrai, hein? Mais enfin, oui, comme blague, c'est rigolo. The Greek word is very bad, but the idea is e.g. amongst friends. Yeah, exactly. They do use it a lot amongst friends. So true. In front of children and strangers. I would never swear exactly, Jason. Yeah. So, do you know the created swear word? So I'm Scandinavian. Yeah, and I know a few different ones actually, Olga. So they tend to use, like in Spanish, they have diez. In Swedish, they use sju instead as well, number seven, or sju, yeah, as well. But it's short for like 20 devils, and they miss out devils, but they used to use 20 or seven or whatever they use. It's funny when you sort of see that kind of thing. I believe that it's very important to learn profane words in the language you're studying in order to avoid avoid falling prey to when false friends, okay, and being subject to dirty looks. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think it is important to learn, just to understand, and so that you have an idea of what you're saying and what's appropriate and when it's being used with you. Funny swear words in other languages. There are a number of them. Do you think any swear words are useful to learn? So this isn't a swear word, but it's kind of like sort of like fiddlesticks that was used before. So Jason, this word in Welsh that we use is navy blue, and navy blue is literally navy blue, but it's used in this dash, and I always find that quite a funny expression, navy blue. I actually think Holin and holiness is quite funny as well because it sounds really, I don't know, it sounds quite funny. The other sort of words that I try to think if there are any other funny ones I've heard that sort of made me laugh when I first heard them. I can't think of any at the moment that are appropriate, but yeah, I have. Those are the two that come to mind. Which languages do you use at home? Be interested to know. So Douglas, at home, I use Macedonian mostly. My wife and I only speak Macedonian. We have basically been only speaking Macedonian now for 17 years. So it's quite a long time to be speaking a language as a home language. And then with my daughter, I use English, French, Spanish, and German. And I have done since she was born. Well, French and English I've used since she was born. And the other two languages since she was 16 months old, and she's now 14. So it's been a fairly long time using all five at home. And then outside the house, I use Albanian, Turkish fairly often, Serbian, Croatian fairly often because we send jokes amongst sort of people in this area. We send jokes in those languages very often. And it's on TV and it's the radio and music is mostly in those languages. And then Bulgarian and Greek when we go. So Greek when we go to Greece, I'll use. Again, my Greek isn't amazing, but I can get by. And then Bulgarian, we have a lot to do in Bulgaria very, very, very often, sort of between Bulgaria and here. So yeah, we have the family here and we have bases in Bulgaria too. So it's kind of an important language for me as well. And so yeah, they're the languages I speak, sort of just in my own context. And then for work, I use other languages too. So just depends. And then with other friends that I have, internationals come and go. So sometimes that landscape will change. So for like 4 years, some of my friends that I spent a lot of time with were Italian. And so we just used Italian because they didn't speak English or Macedonian. So we just used Italian for our main communication. And yeah, that's kind of how it goes in my life. Do you think we should refrain from using more colloquial language in case we don't fully understand its use and just stick to what we know? So colloquial language, I think, is actually generally fine. So for example, because you need to get experience as to when it's appropriate to use and when not. So let's give you an example. You learn the word for car in French, which is voiture. A voiture is the normal word for French, and bagnole is like another word that you can learn for car. But you wouldn't, for example, go and buy. You wouldn't go to. You wouldn't go and buy a car and say, "Je veux une bagnole." I, it would be quite odd to say that. Um, so you will see where people use these types of language, these types of words, and I think it is important to learn where the genre is. It's something we had to do at university, is to be able to understand, the sort of level of formality of a language, and it definitely comes later, but it comes with experience, and I think you start that really quite soon. So it is fine to start learning colloquialisms, slang words or things, because otherwise, when are you going to learn them? You're not going to learn them all together. Yeah. Okay. Jody, Chester. Oh wow, you're a Scouser as well. Ah, yeah. Yeah, great to see you, Jody. Eh? All right, you're doing all right out here, eh? I've not been back for ages. It's been like honestly a long time. But yeah, hopefully then after all this COVID nonsense is over, then I'll get back home and be able to see me mates and me family and that. See how it goes, eh? I agree. I think that sometimes it can feel cool and authentic, yeah, or authentic to swear. Sometimes people do have that experience, Maurizio, that it feels cool to use it. Feels like you're at a higher level because you're using this kind of vocabulary. Actually, you're not, because if you misuse it, it makes your level feel lower, I think, and that's where I'd sort of be careful. But it's quite cool and quite cute when people use certain expressions. Like the one thing that I've heard many people use and misuse in English are where we would use pounds and quid. So it costs 10 quid or it costs £10. So um, that kind of vocabulary, for example, if you misuse quid and you use it in a weird context, it stands out like a sore thumb. So using it with friends who sort of know you and seeing the context and getting really good feedback is important, I think. And with swear words, exactly the same, if not more important. But sometimes even with colloquial language, it can sound really weird. I've had even English-speaking friends from the US and Canada and places, they've used quid sometimes in context that I'm like, we don't, they picked it up when they arrived in the UK and then used it, and like, we wouldn't really say it there. It sounds a bit weird. The situation's a bit too formal to say quid. But yeah, it's also a very personal and subjective thing as well, right? I love the Hungarian word for cheese and the Scottish English word. Okay, it's the only word in Hungarian I know. Okay, wow. Ho iniziato a studiare latino 2 anni fa con il libro. Cos'è questo? Non lo capisco. LLPSI, non so cos'è. Ultimamente è la lingua che preferisco nell'inserimento, ed anche, se sono, fluente solo da poco, sto usando molte più, parolacce del okay, del cosa? Di solito, del solito. È interessante questo, non ho mai studiato così latino come lingua, ho studiato un po', però non così tanto. Allora le parolacce non sono veramente entrate, nel mio vocabolario di latino. Io capisco qualche parolaccia in latino, perché sono anche, simili a quelle parolacce italiane o un'altra lingua latina. Allora, per questo motivo sì, capisco, ma non ho mai studiato così. E ti piace studiare latino, Matteo? E cos'è questo LLPSI? È un corso, un libro, qualcosa di genere? Um, Everyone's talking if we should use these words, but what about can we use them? I found that if I'm really angry in French and I use a swear word, some people just laugh. What do you think? Lisa, yeah, you can, I mean, you're free to use whatever you want. I mean, this is a discussion about how it comes across and what it means to the people around you, I guess. This is more to do with if, right? But can you? Of course you can. I mean, you can say what you want, and it's a free country. It's a free world, right? To say what you want, you can do what you want. Um, I'm just talking really from all my experiences. Sometimes, yeah, words will come out. I mean, I would say that in Macedonian, I would use my language is fairly relaxed, sort of particularly inside the house, of the kind of things I would say that I may even not say in English, because the words would be used more commonly in Macedonian than in English, in a family, and even in a family context. But I wouldn't use them, for example, outside necessarily. Some of the words, even though they're not that bad. I mean, I don't go around saying ridiculous things, of course, but yeah, I mean, if it comes naturally to you to use a word, I mean, who's going to stop you? I mean, seriously, go for it if you want. I just want to share my sort of experience with it and my sort of thoughts on what I've seen. But yeah, I mean, you can do what you want with it. Seriously, it's fine, and I definitely won't judge you for it. I don't know about anyone else, but I won't. I won't think any less of somebody who uses the language they choose. For me, it's all good. Um, do you always have a goal in mind when starting a new language? And how do you decide when you move on to start learning another language? Did you ever move on before reaching your goal? Yeah, Maurizio. So yeah, I mean, I do have a vague goal in mind. I mean, I have a goal in terms of I want to achieve certain things at certain points. So I want to be able to say this or that after, say, a month or 2 months or whatever. In terms of sort of long-term goals, um, I tend not to make very concrete long-term goals. And the simple reason is because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to get involved in a project where I have to focus on another language, or I'm going to have to go to a country, or be in a place where I'm using a certain language at a certain time. So I tend not to set very long-term goals. maybe like a year in advance max at the moment. I mean, when I was at university, it was a bit different. And when I was studying and working, it was different. But not like, studying to use my languages for work, it was different. But nowadays, I tend to take it quite easy. And do I sometimes pick up another? Yes, sometimes I do pick up a new language while I'm studying other ones. I did it this year, in fact, I started learning Korean, and I picked up a number of other languages as projects. Some of them small, short projects that I just wanted to complete a course because it was available, and I decided to use the year of COVID as an opportunity to study languages I wouldn't ordinarily study. A number of them were just like one round about 3-month long courses mostly. So there was North Sami, there was Kristang, and then I did like 3 weeks intensive Scots, and I did a bit of Mayan, but the classes were like a crazy time, and it just wasn't doable. And then I did obviously the year of Cornish and Scottish Gaelic, and so I kind of did those. But then it doesn't stop me doing other things. So I mean, as long as I'm not sort of expecting to make huge progress really quickly, I'm not, I can do a few at a time, right? But then Estonian, I did intensively, and I sort of almost uniquely did sort of solely focused on Estonian for a couple of months there, in July and August, and so that went quite quickly to a level where I could communicate my ideas, not perfectly, but I could yeah, I did okay with it. But I still, even during that, I continued going to my meetings for Korean, my study groups. Just Korean went a lot more slowly during that time, and even Haitian Creole, I was doing Haitian Creole just once a week. I've been doing that for a few months as well, just to sort of learn how to read and understand Haitian Creole. It's been a lot of fun. I'm super interested in the Polyglot conference. What can we learn from it? So you can do quite a lot of stuff, actually. The conference is going to be next month. The tickets will be on sale. I say on sale, it's a donation based, and I don't treat this as a business. So if you want to donate to help to pay for the costs, I find that enough people are generous to give a little bit to do that, to sort of pay for certain technical things and software and licenses and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I find that people are kind enough to do that normally, but I don't expect anything. And in fact, there are options to be able to just join. And during the conference this year, it's going to be super cool because we're going to have loads of like taster sessions in languages and lots of different languages. We're going to have Lingua Cultura coming to with Avishta, and she's going to bring lots of like discussions around language and culture. And we're going to have obviously Zoloa languages with Anya, who are looking at putting some things together too, as well as the sponsors that we have. Italki is putting on all of these taster sessions, which is going to be amazing. They're going to have like loads of them. I think it's like 100 sessions or something ridiculous that they've got planned, like in lots of different languages, which is going to be brilliant. And then we have, I think UTalk and Langfest are going to be doing lots of different activities like quizzes. They normally do like karaoke things. They do all sorts of cool stuff. So they'll be doing things like that throughout the whole 10 days that we have together in October. And then we'll do just general sort of language exchanges. So on the polyglotconference.com website, there is a forum, and people meet on the forum, and they agree to meet informally on the site already from last year. So the site from last year is still up and running, and people are still meeting on a weekly basis to practice languages. That still happens now before the new conference starts. I kept everything open from last year, and we'll do more of that. And we will have question and answer sessions. Olga Koeva, who you see on this chat on YouTube, is very, very kind and is going to be doing some language exchanges herself. hosting them, and also going to be doing some fantastic concerts with wonderful music in multiple languages as well for us. So we've got a lot of very cool things to look forward to, as well as the wonderful presentations we're getting in, which I'm currently working on now, getting them together, uploading them, getting them checked. And then we're going to be getting the subtitles sorted out so that they're as accessible as possible for everyone. So we've got lots of cool things for you to look out for, and I hope that you'll join. I'll do a live about the conference actually very soon, so that we can start talking about it properly. I haven't done that much yet because the tickets really go out from the 1st of October for this year's event. The one for last year's event are already still available, and you can join that if you want. Again, it's voluntary basis if you wanted to make a donation. So there we go. That's basically the conference. Thank you for asking. So Carlos, it's often said that when swearing, we resort to our first language. Have you found an instance where the opposite is true? People swearing more in their L2, L3. Yeah, sometimes I think, Carlos, people will swear in their L2 or L3 or whatever else, simply because they don't have this. They know it's bad. They've had reactions to it to make it to know that it's kind of bad, but because they don't know how bad it is and they haven't been through the sort of teacher telling them off, parents telling them off using it. It's bad. They know it's bad, but they still doesn't feel as bad as using some of the words from their own language. So I've experienced that definitely. And so it feels easier almost to swear in another language. Definitely experienced that before. It feels a bit weird when that happens, but yeah, it does happen. People okay at this point. Brazil. Do they swear a lot in Macedonia? So in Macedonian, people do swear quite a lot. They say quite weird things as well for me, from my ears, like sort of when they shout at the kids or something. Some of the things that they say are quite crazy. And if I were to translate them into English, I think you'd probably be horrified. Some of the things I've heard have been quite. I was like, really shocked. But yeah, and absolutely, there are parallels between other Yugoslav countries where I've heard similar things used as well. Yeah, it's quite an eye opener. They can be quite inventive as well with the language. I find the reactions of people's faces when they hear a Scouser swear to be quite amusing. There's an added level of humour to British cussing and swearing. There is, Jodie. I think this is the thing. It's how you use it and when you use it. I think this is absolutely right. So, and it's the tone you use, right? And as a Scouser, you'll know as well that swearing is very common where in that part of the world. So you know what it's about, but yeah, I mean, somebody arriving there, it depending on where you are, it can be for like posh Scousers, posh Scousers, Jodie. So they can feel quite offended by that. In Finland, also, yeah, they do use the same hell, and yeah, they do, and they use in Finland they will use the same kind of devil and hell language to swear most. Yeah, in Dutch, it's mostly with illnesses. So in Dutch, people will say things like a way to say like sort of buzz off in Dutch, which isn't so bad, is krijg de hik, like get the hiccups. It means like buzz off, go away, shoot. And that's not too bad, but they will say things like get, and then followed by some really bad illnesses. And that's where it gets pretty bad in Dutch. It gets pretty dark. I think it gets pretty dark. The other one that says "Je kan mijn rug op," you can go up my back, which again isn't so crazy. But the other ones, I mean, yeah, they've got some really bad swear words in Dutch that, yeah, I wouldn't even repeat actually here, because I think in English they're not swear words, but in The diseases are actually they're quite serious diseases that they use, and to say that as an insult is, yeah, quite alarming. The first time I heard it, I was really I was quite shocked. What about ways of calling friends? Mate, dude, tío, yeah, tío, chaval, those kinds of things. Bruder, vecchio. Which ones have you seen? Interesting languages. So things for calling people, like those kinds of words. Uh, you see, even those kinds of things, right? People often in English, they will use things like mate or dude with me, and I don't know them. Dude is definitely not my generation. It feels like it's not my social. So it wasn't used as a thing. It's much more American sounding to me. So that sounds really odd to me for people to use that with me. Mate is used a lot in the UK. Um, I never used it, and I don't use it with people. Um, I don't particularly like the word mate. I've never liked it. I don't know why. I just never liked it. People do use it with me, and I mean, as I say, I don't judge anyone for using words that I don't particularly like, but I just find it a little bit too informal for my own, just my own liking. But for me to use, for example, um, I just like the word. I think the word friend is fine. So I wouldn't use mate, and I wouldn't address someone as mate normally. It can Mate can also, if you address it and you use it incorrectly, it can sound a bit aggressive. So yeah, it can like, or pal. In Scotland, for example, you use pal as well. Pal, my pal, and you use it in some parts of England, pal. Yeah, me pal, me mate. So in Scouse, for example, in Scouse dialect, yeah, I mean, if someone says me mate said, we're going out tonight or something like that, it doesn't sound as bad. I just don't. I mean, it sounds different in Scouse than it does in like sort of standard English to me. Don't know why, but it does. Um, which one is the language? Other languages? I'm trying to think. It's very difficult to sort of go across so many languages, and think of them all in a sort of as lists because I don't tend to think that way. But yeah, I mean, like in Spanish, for example, chaval or chavala is used a lot in Spain. Um, tío is very Spanish. Um, but yeah, again, chavala I used to use a lot with my Spanish speaking friends. Chaval. But and tío as well. I would use tío and tía quite a lot. Um, I never used it in German. Bruder. Yeah, mein Bruder. Never really used that. Alter, mein Alter. Yeah. I didn't really use that either in German. Um, I used to in the family where I was, we used to use it was kind of a made up idiolect again. It was kind of like used to yeah, du alter Schweinebacker. It was like you old pig cheek. Um, which was it was kind of a joke, an in joke at the time. Um, but yeah, that was the one we used in Germany when I was living there. It's quite funny. I used to thought it was quite cute. But yeah, Kumpel, for example, as well. There are quite a few words that you can use. Um, yeah, but I don't tend to use them that often. Those kinds of things. Um, lingua latino per per ser illustrata. Conosco questo. Sì, 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 conosco. I've seen it. In fact, I've got that book. I didn't. I was like, what on earth? I've never seen it written that way. Sorry. It's very famous. It is famous. You're right for Latin. Really, really good as well. And the recordings are on YouTube, so you can actually hear the language spoken on YouTube. It's quite cool. In a foreign language, one doesn't not intensive swear words. Yes, exactly. Yeah. If one doesn't start to practice speaking until they're B2 in comprehension, as I talk lessons, so do you think would get on speaking to B2? B2. What you didn't so if you didn't speak until you got to a B2 level, that would be particularly odd for me. I would find that very odd. to not speak anything. It's not say not speak at all, not use any of the language in oral form until you get to a B2 level. I would find that particularly odd, personally. And I would question why someone would do that. I would find it odd. And also, it would be deeply frustrating when you get to speak if you'd studied that much of the language, because B2 is a lot of language. To get to that stage with it never speaking it and then just using it all of a sudden would be deeply frustrating, I think, to do. I would find it really frustrating myself. Just because you know words, you might understand them, but they're not coming to your active mind because you've not revised them or used them actively for almost ever or if ever. So I'd find that quite bizarre myself. Can I swear in Hindi or Urdu? No. So what I can say in Hindi and Urdu, all I can say really is like sort of very basic introduction, and I know some words, but no, I don't. I don't swear in Hindi or Urdu. You've always enjoyed weather-related swearing in Afrikaans. Okay, that's funny. Even though I've lived in the US for decades. Yeah, I can't. I don't even know if I recall hearing the weather-related swearing in Afrikaans. But that's funny. It's a funny idea. You heard people in Dutch say, yeah, Rasmus. It's not the nicest of words to use, is it? In Dondehop, yeah, Dondehop, yeah, exactly. So you can use that in Dutch as well, Dondehop, thunder up. Yeah, mijn rug op is old-fashioned. Yeah, it is old-fashioned, but it's kind of, yeah, this is kind of the easier level language is common in Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, not only in Finnish, also in Icelandic, actually, Olga, and Faroese, I believe, too. Direct translation, okay. Obdonder, okay. Oh, that would be the thing for, oh, wow. Okay, that's a bit stronger than an Afrikaans, that's funny. Donder, the thunder. I've heard some posh people say the word mate. Yeah, some people do. Some posh people do use the word mate, absolutely. People sort of are seen as posh. So mate isn't something, I mean, this is what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say it's, I just, it's a personal thing that I just don't particularly like the word mate as something I would use. Yeah, but it's a totally normal word. Hello, Richard. How are you doing? Well, thank you. I'm doing very well. Okay, I think I've got to the end of the questions. I'm going to try. I've got to the end of the questions on YouTube. I got to the end of the questions at first on Instagram. Now I'm just going to check to see if there are any other questions that I haven't answered, but I think I should head off very soon. Do you spell the Greek word the way it sounds, Malaka? No, yeah, exactly. So you spell it. Yeah, the second way you've written there is how you spell it in Greek. Okay. Yeah, it's funny that there's a place called Malaka in Greeks find that absolutely hilarious when they hear it. Did you switch from coger to agarrar? No, I didn't. I actually went to tomar. I stuck to tomar un autobús, tomar un avión, tomar lo que sea. So I tried not to say coger un avión, coger un autobús. In Mexico, I tried to use tomar instead, to like literally to take. Agarrar for me feels weird to use agarrar because I really feel like kind of grasping and grabbing. I mean, grab a cat. I mean, I think people do say I'll grab a taxi, or in English as well, we would use that. But I personally wouldn't. It feels a bit too, I don't know, not used to using it. So I'd probably use tomar or llamar. It's a taxi, for example, just call one. Do I speak any Hungarian? A little bit. I did a sort of a weird 1 month of Hungarian many years ago, and I used the Pimsleur course just to try it out, and that kind of stuck with me. I don't know very much in Hungarian. I can sort of, if I go there, I can go to a restaurant and order something to eat and sort of say a little bit about myself, maybe. But I don't speak Hungarian particularly well, and it is a language that I've always said that I will try to learn. Because my goal originally when I first came to live in the Balkans was to learn all of the Balkan languages. And for me, Hungarian fits into that. Even though Hungary itself is not a Balkan country, it's described as a Central European country, and that's fine. Hungarian as a language is spoken in the Balkans. So it's spoken in the north of Serbia. It's spoken in parts of Romania. Romania's kind of Balkans-ish. I don't know if it's officially Balkans, Romania, but it's I don't know. It's kind of one of those weird. It's weird actually when people talk here about the Balkans. They don't normally talk about Romania very much, but I mean, it kind of is. It's kind of one of those things that you could say it's Balkans and not. It, definitely Bulgaria and Greece and Albania are included, and then the former Yugoslav countries are included. But yeah, I mean, so for me, Hungarian is a Balkan language as well. So I would want to learn it for that reason. It's not a language that I get to hear very often, to be honest. If I'm really honest, I do see it sometimes on Facebook. I have some friends in Hungary who write in it, and so I get to sort of hear it and practice it a little bit. I understand it a little bit, but I'm not particularly good at it. Pozdrawiam. Pokozdanie. Dzięki. Dzięki. Dzięki bardzo. Salut, salut. Yeah. Cool. How much Hungarian can you remember from that Pimsla challenge? Oof. From the actual challenge, I'm not sure. I since that challenge, I've been back to Hungary a few times, and I always try to sort of remember bits of Hungarian. I ask things. I sort of do basic stuff in Hungarian. Look, I mean, I probably know a few hundred words in Hungarian, not much more. I've looked at the grammar and sort of seen how it generally works, and I've discussed it on multiple occasions with people who speak it way better than I do. But yeah, I mean, I've not studied it to sort of a really high level at all ever. So I mean, my vocabulary is probably, yeah, I would say approaching an A1.1 in Hungarian, which is kind of the very first part of the A1. Bearing in mind sort of an A to get to an A2 is around 1,200 to 1,500 words, roughly, in a language. So I've definitely not done that much. I've probably looked at over that much, but I've not actively learnt or tried to use language to that level. But I would potentially understand some of the words that you'd cover up to that level, if that makes sense. And also, there are some words that have been borrowed from other languages as well. I just know, or words have been taken into other Balkan languages from Hungarian or German that's spoken in Austria. So there are certain words that I know from that as well. You studied it's a B1, B2 level, but it evaporated over the last 5 years. Yeah, Hungarian. Rasmus, I feel your pain. It's normal. I mean, with a language that's sort of unrelated, you find that it disappears and evaporates a lot more quickly than say other languages do. So I think that's quite a natural thing to have happened. But I'm sure if you sort of get back into it, certain things will come back. Certain things you'll be like, wow, I need to re-memorize that again because it's just not there anymore. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you for joining me and for keeping me company today. I've really enjoyed speaking to you about swear words and just chatting in general, answering the questions that you had. And if you have any thoughts or ideas of what you want me to talk about again next week, then please do let me know. I'm open to suggestions. I will take everything into account and just comment and let me know. And always remember, if you're not following me, please do follow me, share and like and all that kind of stuff that people say. I always forget to say that because I'm just terrible. But please do. Of course, your support means a lot to me. So I really appreciate it. And if you like what I do, then it's nice to hear that. So thank you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday or wherever you are in the world, and I will look forward to speaking to you again very, very soon. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye, and happy language learning.